All right. What a day. Beautiful paper. Happy Friday, beautiful people. Happy Friday. I don't know. Happy Friday, beautiful people. Salutations, Nikki. Salutations. Joy, grand rising. Shalom, shalom. Put my Carmex on my lips. All right, y'all. Happy Friday. It is January the 21st, 2022. Day number 10 of year 4 of reading through the books of the Law and the Prophets, and of the 4-year consecutive day count, day 1028. Y'all, today we're reading Genesis 28 through 30, and then we're going to pick back up in My Big Toe, also known as My Big Theory of Everything. And we're going to start in chapter 5. So let's go ahead and get this rolling here with the Shema chapter, which is found in Deuteronomy chapter 6. A call for wholehearted commitment. These are the commands, decrees, and regulations that the Lord your God commanded me to teach you. You must obey them in the land you are about to enter and occupy. And you and your children and grandchildren must fear the Lord your God as long as you live. If you obey all his decrees and commands, you will enjoy a long life. Listen closely, Israel, and be careful to obey. Then all will go well with you, and you will have many children in the land flowing with milk and honey, just as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, promised you. Listen, Israel. Yahuwah, our God, he is one God. And you must love Yahuwah, your God, with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. And you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I'm giving you today. Repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you're at home and when you're on the road, when you're going to bed, and when you're getting up. Tie them to your hands and wear them on your foreheads as reminders. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Yahuwah your God will soon bring you into the land that he swore to give to you when he made a vow to your ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It is a land with large, prosperous cities that you did not build. The houses will be richly stocked with goods you did not produce. You will draw water from cisterns you did not dig, and you will eat from vineyards and olive trees you did not plant. When you have eaten your fill in this land, be careful not to forget Yahuwah, your God, who rescued you from slavery in the land of Egypt. You must fear Yahuwah your God and serve him. When you take an oath, you must only use his name. You must not worship any gods of the neighboring nations, for the Lord your God who lives among you is a jealous God. His anger will flare up against you, and he will wipe you from the face of the earth. You must not test Yahuwah your God as you did when you complained at Massa. You must diligently obey the commands of Yahuwah your God, all the laws and decrees he has given you. Do what is right and good in Yahuwah's sight, so all will go well with you. Then you will enter and occupy the good land that the Lord swore to give to your ancestors. You will drive out all the enemies living in the land, just as Yahuwah said you would. In the future, your children will ask you, what is the meaning of these laws, decrees, and regulations that Yahuwah our God has commanded us to obey? Then you must tell them, we were Pharaoh's slaves in Egypt, but Yahuwah brought us out of Egypt with his strong hand. Yahuwah did miraculous signs and wonders before our eyes, dealing terrifying blows against Egypt and Pharaoh and all his people. He brought us out of Egypt so he could give us this land he had sworn to give to our ancestors. And Yahuwah our God commanded us to obey all these decrees and to fear him, so he can continue to bless us and preserve our lives as he has done to this day. But we will be counted as righteous when we obey all the commands Yahuwah our God has given unto us. All right, beautiful people. So let's go ahead and get started. Over here, Genesis chapter 28. Okay, so remember the shenanigans yesterday between Jacob and his mama. So Isaac called for Jacob, blessed him, and said, "You must not marry any of these Canaanite women. Instead, go at once to Padan Aram, to the house of your grandfather Bethel, and marry one of your uncle Laban's daughters. May God Almighty bless you and give you many children, and may your descendants multiply and become many nations. May God pass on to you and to your descendants the blessings he promised to Abraham. May you own this land where you are now living as a foreigner, for God gave this land to Abraham." So Isaac sent Jacob away, and he went to Padan Aram to stay with his uncle Laban, his mother's brother, the son of Bethuel of Aramean. Esau knew that his father Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him to Padan Aram to find a wife, and that he had warned Jacob, "You must not marry a Canaanite woman." He also knew that Jacob had obeyed his parents and gone to Padan Aram. It was now very clear to Esau that his father did not like the local Canaanite women. So Esau visited his uncle Ishmael's family and married one of Ishmael's daughters, in addition to the wives he already had. His new wife's name was Mahalath. She was the sister of Nebaioth and the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son. Jacob's dream at Bethel. Meanwhile, Jacob left Beersheba and traveled toward Haran. At sundown, he arrived at a good place to set up camp and stopped there for the night. Jacob found a stone to rest his head against and lay down to sleep. As he slept, he dreamt of a stairway that reached from earth up to heaven, and he saw the angels of God going up and down the stairway. And remember, this story, encoded within this story, is also the truth about who we are and how we are to return to our Creator, right? It's that stairway. It's talking about the spine. It's encoded, y'all. Audrey, shalom. Mom, shalom, shalom. Trina, hey, girl, hey. Batwa boo, batwa boo. At the top of the stairway stood the Lord, and he said, "I am the Lord, the God of your grandfather Abraham and the God of your father Isaac. The ground you are lying on belongs to you. I am giving it to you and to your descendants. Your descendants will be as numerous as the dust of the earth. They will spread out in all directions, to the west, to the east, to the north, and the south, and all the families of the earth will be blessed through you and your descendants. What's more, I am with you, and I will protect you wherever you go. One day I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have finished giving you everything I have promised you." Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I wasn't even aware of it." But he was also afraid and said, "What an awesome place this is. It is none other than a house of God, the very gateway to heaven." Auntie, happy Friday. The next morning, Jacob got up very early. He took the stone he had rested his head against, and he set it upright as a memorial pillar. Then he poured olive oil over it. He named that place Bethel, which means house of God, although it was previously called Luz, L-U-Z. Then Jacob made this vow: "If God will indeed be with me and protect me on this journey, and if he will provide me with food and clothing, and if I return safely to my father's home, then the Lord will certainly be my God. And this memorial pillar I have set up will become a place for worshiping God, and I will present to God a tenth of everything he gives to me." Next chapter, Genesis chapter 29. Jacob arrives at Padan Aram. Then Jacob hurried on. Finally arriving in the land of the east, he saw a well in the distance. 3 flocks of sheep and goats lay in an open field beside it, waiting to be watered. But a heavy stone covered the mouth of the well. It was the custom there to wait for all the flocks to arrive before removing the stone and watering the animals. Afterward, the stone would be placed back over the mouth of the well. Jacob went over to the shepherds and asked, "Where are you from, my friends?" "We are from Haran," they answered. "Do you know a man there named Laban, the grandson of Nahor?" he asked. "Yes, we do," they replied. "Is he doing well?" Jacob asked. "Yes, he's well," they answered. "Look, here comes his daughter Rachel with the flock now." Jacob said, "Look, it's still broad daylight, too early to round up the animals. Why don't you water the sheep and goats so they can get back out to pasture?" "We can't water the animals until all the flocks have arrived," they replied. Then the shepherds removed the stone from the mouth of the well and Then the shepherds moved the stone from the mouth of the well, and we water all the sheep and goats. Jacob was still talking with them when Rachel arrived with her father's flock, for she was a shepherd. And because Rachel was his cousin, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and because the sheep and goats belonged to his uncle Laban, Jacob went over to the well and moved the stone from its mouth and watered his uncle's flock. Then Jacob kissed Rachel, and he wept aloud. He explained to Rachel that he was her cousin on her father's side, the son of her aunt Rebekah. So Rachel quickly ran and told her father Laban. As soon as Laban heard that his nephew Jacob had arrived, he ran out to meet him. He embraced and kissed him and brought him home. When Jacob had told him his story, Laban exclaimed, "You are really my own flesh and blood." Jacob marries Leah and Rachel. After Jacob had stayed with Laban for about a month, Laban said to him, "You shouldn't work for me without pay just because we are relatives. Tell me how much your wages should be." Now Laban had 2 daughters. The older daughter was named Leah, and the younger was Rachel. There was no sparkle in Leah's eyes, but Rachel had a beautiful figure and a lovely face. Since Jacob was in love with Rachel, he told her father, "I'll work for you for 7 years if you'll give me Rachel, your younger daughter, as my wife." "Agreed," Laban replied. "I'd rather give her to you than to anyone else. Stay and work with me." So Jacob worked 7 years to pay for Rachel, but his love for her was so strong that it seemed to him but a few days. Finally, the time came for him to marry her. "I have fulfilled my agreement," Jacob said to Laban. "Now give me my wife so I can sleep with her." So Laban invited everyone in the neighborhood and prepared a wedding feast. But that night, when it was dark, Laban took Leah to Jacob and he slept with her. Laban had given Leah a servant, Zilpah, to be her maid. But when Jacob woke up in the morning, it was Leah. "What have you done to me?" Jacob raged at Laban. "I worked 7 years for Rachel. Why have you tricked me?" "It is not our custom here to marry off the younger daughter ahead of the firstborn," Laban replied. "But wait until the bridal week is over, then we'll give you Rachel too, provided you promise to work another 7 years for me." So Jacob agreed to work 7 more years. A week after Jacob had married Leah, Laban gave him Rachel too. Laban gave Rachel a servant, Bilhah, to be her maid. So Jacob slept with Rachel too, and he loved her much more than Leah. Then he stayed and worked for Laban the additional 7 years. So if y'all was here when we was reading Legends of the Jews, this story was friggin' hilarious, especially the night of the party when he thought he was originally about to get Rachel, right? Tell you right here, they invited everybody from the neighborhood, everybody around, right? But it gives you a lot more details. And first of all, Rachel and Leah were twins. When it said Rachel had her eyes in here, what did it say about her eyes in here? It says there was no sparkle in Leah's eyes, but in some of the other versions it said she had weak eyes. So we talked about that a little bit. It was like, well, maybe she was cross-eyed or something like that. But it was funny. You got to go back to that video. But if you go to the Legends of the Jews, you will see this whole story. Yeah, the people at the party didn't even, well, they kind of did, though. Tiffany said the people at the party didn't even give them a heads up. Remember when she was dancing, the people was like, the song that they were saying, they were kind of like chanting her name. And Jacob was wondering why they saying, "Oh, Leah," something, I forget what it was, but something, "Oh, Leah, oh, Leah." He thought it was a part of the song. He was like, "Okay, oh, Leah, I'm about to get Rachel." But they were kind of trying to tell him, like, yo, that's Leah. Leah about to get married. Yeah, he didn't understand. He didn't understand none of that. Everybody was aware, which is probably why he cut the lights off. Laban cut the lights off, so Jacob really couldn't see that he had switched them out. Because remember, they were twins and they both were very beautiful, right? And like, if you just saw the figures in the dark, you would mistake them for one another because they were built the same and everything. Is just, you could tell them apart by their eyes. So, but yeah, when he woke up and the sun was rising, he realized he saw them eyes. What have you done to me, Laban? Y'all got to go back and read this story. I'll post the link. Hold on. It is hilarious. I be crying when I read that story. Hold on. Sacred text. Rachel and Leah. That whole story. Read the whole thing. We're gonna be reading for like a couple days. But y'all gotta go read it. It's hilarious. I'll post it and I tell you what. Well, actually, I'll just, because it'll have the page. You just read the whole page if you got time, so you can kind of see everything else in context, how it built up, you know, because it's going to give you more detail than what the regular canonized Bible give you, because this really just sums it up. It just give you like a whole 50-something books, but it's really a very short summation of like the bigger story that you can find in other texts, right? So yeah, go back and read that. That was super funny if you want a good laugh for the day. All right. Okay. So we'll keep on moving on. Jacob's many children. When the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, he enabled her to have children, but Rachel could not conceive. So Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben, for she said, the Lord has noticed my misery, and now my husband will love me. Lavan, blessings. She soon became pregnant again and gave birth to another son. She named him Simeon, for she said, the Lord heard that I was in love and has given me another son. Then she became pregnant a third time and gave birth to another son. He was named Levi, for she said, surely this time my husband will feel affection for me, since I have given him 3 sons. Once again, Leah became pregnant. Jacob didn't love her, but he was sure pumping her up. No, I love Rachel, but come here, girl. Once again, Leah became pregnant and gave birth to another son. She named him Judah, for she said, now I will praise the Lord. And then she stopped having children. Last chapter for today, y'all. Genesis chapter 30. When Rachel saw that she wasn't having any children for Jacob, she became jealous of her sister. She pleaded with Jacob, give me children or I'll die. Then Jacob became furious with Rachel. Am I God? He asked. He's the one who has kept you from having children. Then Rachel told him, take my maid Bilhah and sleep with her. She will bear children for me, and through her I can have a family too. So Rachel gave her servant Bilhah to Jacob as a wife, and he slept with her. Bilhah became pregnant and presented him with a son. Rachel named him Dan, for she said, God has vindicated me. He has heard my request and given me a son. Then Bilhah became pregnant again and gave Jacob a second son. Rachel named him Naphtali, for she said, I have struggled hard with my sister, and I am winning. I know, Trina. Look, Trina said for him not to love her, he was sure giving her the business. Meanwhile, Leah realized that she wasn't getting pregnant anymore, so she took her servant Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Soon Zilpah presented him with a son. Leah named him Gad, for she said, how fortunate I am. Then Zilpah gave Jacob a second son, and Leah named him Asher, for she said, what joy is mine. Now the other women will celebrate with me. Poor Jacob, he getting caught between this. Jacob would have been a faithful man, right? If Laban hadn't tricked him, it would have just been him and Rachel, right? But then everybody want a piece of the little puzzle, right? Not piece of the puzzle, piece of the pie, right? Mind you, none of this was Jacob's doing. None of this was his thoughts. Everybody else was, I ain't gonna say they was making him. He was just like, I'm going along with this. What? I can do what? Okay. You sure? Like, go ahead, give me another son. Okay. Come here, Bill Huh? Leah angrily replied, wasn't it enough that you stole my husband? Now, hold on. I done skipped the whole part. Hold on. Look, let me go back. I'm being silly. Hold on. Meanwhile, Leah realized that she wasn't getting pregnant anymore, so she took her servant Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Soon Zilpah presented him with a son. Leah named him Gad, for she said, how fortunate I am. Then Zilpah gave Jacob a second son, and Leah named him Asher, for she said, what joy is mine. Now the other women will celebrate with me. One day, during the wheat harvest, Reuben found some mandrakes growing in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Rachel begged Leah, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. But Leah angrily replied, wasn't it enough that you stole my husband? Now will you steal my son's mandrakes too? Rachel answered, I will let Jacob sleep with you tonight if you give me some of the mandrakes. Yo. And for him to love Rachel so much, he was sure giving up the business to everyone else. Trina, I know, right? Look, Jacob didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. Like, you sold me for what? Some mandrake, for some fruit. For some fruit? Rachel answered, I will let Jacob sleep with you tonight if you give me some of the mandrakes. So that evening, as Jacob was coming home from the fields, Leah went out to meet him. You must come and sleep with me tonight, she said. I have paid for you with some mandrakes that my son found, mind you. He ain't grow them himself. He definitely a pawn in that game, Dana. Not that we done labeled over this tree and we watered it our own blood, sweat, and tears, but you traded me for some mandrakes that your son found. Like, nobody's asking questions here. Nobody. I mean, at least Jacob should have been asking some kind of questions. So that evening, as Jacob was coming home from the fields, Leah went out to meet him. You must come and sleep with me tonight, she said. I have paid for you with some mandrakes that my son found. So that night, he slept with Leah. God answered Leah's prayers. She became pregnant again and gave birth to a fifth son for Jacob. She named him Issachar, for she said, God has rewarded me for giving my servant to my husband as a wife. Really? Then Leah became pregnant again and gave birth to a sixth son for Jacob. She named him Zebulun, for she said, God has given me a good reward. Now my husband will treat me with respect, for I have given him 6 sons. Later, she gave birth to a daughter and named her Dinah. Tiffany said mandrakes are supposed to be some kind of aphrodisiac. Maybe Rachel was preparing for her night with Jacob. Yeah, I know. Oh, Dana, look, people be trying to be Jacob in the name of scripture these days, don't they though? But you ain't got. Oh, let me not start. Then God remembered Rachel's plight and answered her prayers by enabling her to have children. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son. God has removed my disgrace, she said, and she named him Joseph, for she said, may the Lord add yet another son to my family. Jacob's wealth increases. Soon after Rachel had given birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, please release me so I can go to my own home country. Let me take my wives and my children, for I have earned them by serving you, and let me be on my way. You certainly know how hard I have worked for you. Please listen to me, Laban replied. I have become wealthy, for the Lord has blessed me because of you. Tell me how much I owe. Whatever it is, I'll pay it. Jacob replied, you know how hard I've worked for you, and how your flocks and herds have grown under my care. You had little indeed before I came, but your wealth has increased enormously. The Lord has blessed you through everything I've done. But now, what about me? When can I start providing for my own family? "What wages do you want?" Laban asked again. Jacob replied, "Don't give me anything. Just do this one thing, and I'll continue to tend and watch over your flocks. Let me inspect your flocks today and remove all the sheep and goats that are speckled or spotted, along with the black sheep. Give these to me as my wages. In the future, when you check on the animals you have given me as my wages, you will see that I have been honest. If you find in my flock any goats without speckles or spots, or any sheep that are not black, you will know that I have stolen them from you." "All right," Laban replied. "It will be as you say." But that very day, Laban went out and removed the male goats that were streaked and spotted, and all the female goats that were speckled and spotted or had white patches, and all the black sheep. He placed them in the care of his own sons, who took them a 3 days' journey from where Jacob was. Meanwhile, Jacob stayed and cared for the rest of Laban's flock. Oh, you sly something or other. Then Jacob took some fresh branches from poplar, almond, and plane trees and peeled off strips of bark, making white streaks on them. Then he placed these peeled branches in the watering troughs where the flocks came to drink, for that was where they made it. And when they made it in front of the white streaked branches, they gave birth to young that were streaked, speckled, and spotted. Jacob separated those lambs from Laban's flock, and at mating time he turned the flock to face Laban's animals that were streaked or black. This is how he built his own flock instead of increasing Laban's. Whenever the stronger females were ready to mate, Jacob would place the peeled branches in the watering troughs in front of them. Then they would mate in front of the branches. But he didn't do this with the weaker ones, so the weaker lambs belonged to Laban, and the stronger ones were Jacob's. As a result, Jacob became very wealthy with large flocks of sheep and goats, female and male servants, and many camels and donkeys. And this is where we pause at today, beautiful people. Hope y'all enjoyed the story. I hope y'all really go back and read it. If y'all don't go back and read it, at least find the video from last year when we read through Legends of the Jews, when we were going through it. It was super funny. All right, y'all. So we picking back up in my big toe, or my big theory of everything, with chapter 5. We might get through a few chapters today. But we got 27 minutes. Oh yeah, we're gonna get through a few. I think 5 is a little bit longer. Oh, what's that, section 2? No. But is it real? Oh, okay. I flipped too fast. Okay. So we'll probably end up reading like 3 or 4 of these little chapters today. Okay, chapter 5. Is this guy Monroe nuts or what? Get a job intones a popular song of my youth. Everybody must get out of school sometime. I was now almost 27 and had been in school continuously since I was 5. With research completed, I settled on my first real job applying classical physics and mathematics to electromechanical and electromagnetic systems simulation. A real job with a real paycheck. Imagine that. I continued to meditate more or less regularly, but I had found that I did not need the mantra any longer. A little research and experimentation indicated that any 2-syllable nonsense word ending in ing, a resonant sound, worked as well as any other, including my super secret mantra. Listen, y'all, I'm going to read it again. Yahuwah is one. Shalom, shalom. Hallelujah. Listen. Because remember how I was explaining to y'all when we was going through the book, the walk of the spirit, the walk of power, praying in tongues. Like, if you don't have one, like, or if you didn't hear one, or if y'all didn't download one to you that you could hear, you could still do it. Like, you can just take a couple words, a string of words, put it in a different language, and repeat that over and over. It could be 1 word, 2 words. It could be a sentence. Just memorize it and repeat it, right? It's gonna enact that same thing going on the inside of you. Listen, we about to get into this. Linda, shalom, shalom. Okay, look. I'm going to start this over. I continued to meditate more or less regularly, but I had found that I did not need the mantra any longer. A little research and experimentation indicated that any two-syllable nonsense word ending in ing, a resonant sound, worked as well as any other, including my given super secret mantra. There was nothing mystical or magical here, only a method of controlling thoughts by filling the otherwise active mind with fluff, nothing but science and technique. No bananas or hankies were required. Repeating the mantra eventually seemed to get in the way and slow me down. Consequently, I dropped it. The meditation state was now familiar enough that I could go there in an instant and return as quickly. This level of control was handy at work. I could meditate, find solutions, and return without anyone suspecting that I was doing something strange. To the world, I seemed to be deep in thought. That I was disembodied point. Hold on. Oh, okay. Let me go back. These two sentences kind of go together. Okay. This level of control was handy at work. I could meditate, find solutions, and return without anyone suspecting that I was doing something strange. To the world, I seemed to be deep in thought. That I was disembodied, point consciousness adrift in the void, going completely from their world with no residual awareness of their reality was my secret. Sometimes people would try to engage me while I was gone. To them, it was as if engaging a dead body. Needless to say, I gained a reputation for being eccentric with unusual powers of concentration or an unusual ability to sleep while sitting up. Nobody could tell which. My boss, Bill Yost, was a super person. He was smart, no frills, no BS, no hidden agenda, no tact. An engineer through and through, bright, honest, and straightforward. This is the personality type that I related to most easily. One day, Mr. Yost came by my desk and tossed a book at me. I caught it in midair and read the title, Journeys Out of the Body by Robert A. Monroe. What's this? I asked, surprised by the strangeness of the subject matter. Read it, he said, and tell me what you think. When your boss says read it, you just read it and do not ask why. I read Journeys during the next few days. The book was configured as a diary. It was a "this is what happened to me" type of story, wherein Monroe claimed to have collected hard evidence in support of the reality of the out-of-body experience. The experiences, the evidence of the experiences and the evidence of their realness were laid out matter-of-factly with no theory or belief system attached. It was a wild concept, a more or less independent reality reachable only through the mind. Having prior experience with functional altered states of consciousness, I was probably more open-minded than the average scientific type, but not gullible. I knew what was real to me, and my measurement data, in parentheses he had experience, included none of that. It was very interesting, I told my boss, but I don't know what to make of it. Is this guy Monroe nuts, or is he trying to sell books to the gullible, or is he for real? I asked rhetorically. I continued with barely a pause. How can you tell where he's coming from? If his story is for real, if you take him at face value, a new aspect of reality opens up that I have never before considered. That would be a definite wow. But for me, it just sounds wild, and I have no way to judge the veracity of it. Having spit all of this out in rapid fire, barely pausing to breathe, I now took a deep breath and waited for the reaction. I watched my boss carefully, to see if I had made a fool of myself by being too open. As a student, I was used to having to get the right answer. Was I supposed to condemn it as foolish rubbish or believe it as a strong possibility? I had no idea where he was coming from. He had given me no hints. I was working as a civilian in a military organization. It was 1972, and the people here were conservative. I was a long-haired, wild-eyed kid physicist recently out of graduate school. I had about decided that my openness had been a political mistake when Mr. Yost finally spoke. I agree with you, he said thoughtfully. It is a wild concept, isn't it? Yes, it is, I agreed. Very wild. But consider what it would mean if it were true, he continued, with an enthusiasm that indicated that he had thought about it seriously. I did not reply. Think about that, he said. What does it logically imply if it is true, if the evidence is real and not made up? Yeah, I said. Pretty strange stuff. But how can you ever know if it is true or made up? He nodded in agreement and changed the subject. That was the end of it. Not another word was mentioned about journeys, at least not for a few weeks. And Journeys clearly was the name of the book they mentioned before. I had almost forgotten about Monroe's book, having put it out of my mind as something that could never be logically confirmed or denied and therefore was irrelevant. Would you like to go with us to see Monroe? My boss asked me when we were alone. Huh? I muttered, not making a connection. There's a group of us from work going to see Monroe. You know, the guy who wrote Journeys, this Friday after work. Do you want to go with us? He asked. Where? I asked in reply. Just outside of town, about 45 minutes from here. He shot back with some excitement in his voice. Sure, I said. I would really like to meet this guy and see if he's crazy or sane, honest or a hustler, delusional or rational. Me too, said Yost with a twinkle in his eye. Me too. Next chapter. Face to face with the Wizard of Whistlefield. Dark night, shalom. All right. Late Friday afternoon finally came. While our co-workers headed home to begin their weekends, 12 of us piled into 3 cars for the trip to Monroe's. I did not know these people. I was a relatively new employee within an organization that employed about 500 people. We were a strange crew, male and female, young and old, very conservative, mostly professional, technical types. We were not the sort of people one would expect to be eagerly converging on Mr. Out of Body. I was impressed. There were this many open-minded people where I worked. As always, anything unexpected demanded an immediate reassessment. I hypothesized that living almost exclusively among hardcore scientists for the past 7 years had inadvertently skewed my judgment of people in general. Clearly, there were bias errors in my analysis algorithms. That was a serious problem. Within a few seconds, I had laid out a tentative plan for debugging my assumptions and made a mental note to observe these people more closely. Most were skeptical. One of the ladies was a little frightened. Everyone was enthusiastic and nobody knew what to expect. They all jabbered nervously and endlessly. The scene seemed hyperactive and irrational to me. As usual, I said nothing. I'm not a good mixer. I did not relate to unfocused, bubbling emotion or anxiety, and I did not understand these people. Their lives seemed to be driven, or at least animated, by random, irrational feelings. They were strangely affected by uncertainty. At the time, I had no idea that they were the ones who were actually normal. Years of graduate school and a lack of mainstream social interaction had nudged my vision of normalcy a tad off center. I thought that Spock was normal while the rest of the Enterprise crew were hopeless, eternally lucky mushheads. I heaved a sigh. This is going to be a weird night, I thought to myself, with all these weird people on this weird excursion to see Mr. Weird. As it turned out, except for the people I was traveling with, it was not actually that weird, but it changed my life for forever. Bob Monroe lived on an estate named Whistlefield, 500 acres of lakes, forests, and fields. A large country manor house, elegantly perched on the top of a hill, half-dozen horses, a barn, and 2 small lakes thrown in for good measure. It appeared to me that Mr. Monroe was a relatively wealthy Southern gentleman. We slowly motored down half-a-mile-long driveway that was bordered by a freshly painted white board fence. A few horses trotted along with us. Whoa, this is classy, I thought. This guy is no poor ravaging lunatic, that's for sure. My analysis continued. Weird books don't pay that well. It doesn't appear that duping the gullible for their money is going to be a likely motivation. Nevertheless, I reserved final judgment on that issue until I could finally meet the man for myself. The car finally stopped in front of the house. Several large dogs came bounding out to meet us. 2 Dalmatians and 2 large German shepherds were vigorously sounding the alarm that intruders were in the driveway. My riding companions thought it better to stay in the car until the friendliness of the dogs could be verified. Nonsense. These people were so strange, like frightened children. I wondered what could have possibly happened to them to make them that way. Dogs bark at strangers because that is what they do. It means nothing. I quickly popped out of the car to say hello and rub some ears. I was immediately mobbed by 3 wet tongues and wagging tails. It was love at first sight. They acted as if they had not been petted for weeks. It felt good to be out of that crowded car and to be surrounded by rational beings that knew what they were about. I immediately felt more centered. I should explain that popping out of that car had been neither brave nor foolish. Those dogs were obviously friendly. What I did not understand was why that fact was not obvious to everyone else. I surmised that either I happened to be riding with a group of people who were not familiar with dogs, or that one dog challenged person's fear had influenced the rest. By now, everyone was getting out of their cars and looking around, wondering what to do next. Perhaps I shouldn't have changed into these old jeans, one of the ladies said apprehensively. She was obviously intimidated by the classiness of Monroe's estate. All 3 women present were reflexively fumbling in their purses for fresh makeup. Why do they always do that? I wondered silently. Haven't they figured out by now it won't make any difference? I was always amazed and amused when people were internally driven to blatantly irrational behavior. I'm reading from My Big Toe, Dark Night. This is the next book that we started. And you will see the link. If you go back for the last couple of days, you will see the link in the description box. But it'll also be in there today and every day while we're reading it. I was always amazed and amused when people were internally driven to blatantly irrational behavior. I had for many years been curious about the root causes of cultural insanity, those absurdly illogical attitudes and actions that our cultures considers normal. Some, including makeup urgency, are entirely benign. Others range from mildly dysfunctional to terribly destructive. I had come to the tentative conclusion that the key motivators of cultural insanity were fear-based and emotionally driven. I could not relate in the slightest to either. Nonetheless, I intuitively knew that this was not a good thing and that it did not speak highly of our society's overall level of rationality. I was curious about it and took careful mental notes whenever I noticed such a display. I did not feel superior. I had no inclination to make comparisons. I was an impartial observer with an insatiable curiosity. That's all. I was merely different, not better or worse than others because of that difference. I had been born It seemed a perpetual outsider, and I liked it that way. Outsiders have a more objective and impartial view. As a scientist, nothing was more important than logical clarity and objectivity. Being different and having an outsider's view had generally been comfortable for me. I saw it as an advantage. It suited me well. My reverie into the characteristics and causes of illogical social behavior was suddenly upstaged by something more important. The large white door of Whistlefield Manor began to swing open. Conversations were instantly terminated in mid-sentence. All heads turned with silent expectation. The one, the only one, the amazing, out-of-body man was about to turn to flesh and blood before our eyes. We will all soon know if this guy was nuts or what. Out stepped Mr. Monroe into the doorway. For a second or two, he seemed the slightest bit tentative, like a man who clearly knew he was about to be examined and evaluated like a captive alien or a strange animal at the zoo. He gazed out at the crowd of nameless heads staring silently back at him. After the briefest of pauses, he stepped fully out into the elegant open stone porch with confidence and a solid presence. He was not wearing a white suit with matching hat and string tie like Colonel Sanders, the only Southern gentleman I could bring to mind. Instead, he looked comfortable, informal, and friendly, more like the dogs than the house. Robert Monroe was a heavy-set man of medium height. He wore a big smile and had a twinkle in his eye. Just looking at him made you feel relaxed. He greeted us all individually as if he were an experienced politician, making quips and jokes as he went. This guy could be Santa Claus, I thought with more than a little amusement. A jolly old elf passing the summer sipping mint juleps on the veranda of his country estate. What are you smiling at? He demanded good-humorously at his attention. What are you smiling at? He demanded good-humoredly as his attention suddenly focused in my direction. He was now looking directly at me with a knowing, impish grin. For a moment, I had the feeling he must have read my mind and was amused at my vision of Santa Monroe. Oh, nothing, I replied, lamely brushing off the question. Before he could react, I instantly followed that dodge with a question of my own. How and when did you first go out of body? I asked. Up to this point, nobody had been that direct. I did not know how to be any other way. It suddenly grew quiet and more focused. Everybody was now intently listening. It just happened, he said. It just started happening about 15 years ago for no apparent reason. How did you react to that experience? I continued without pause. I thought I might be going nuts, he said. It worried me initially, but I couldn't help experimenting with it. It's my nature. He had consulted with psychologists, psychiatrists, and a parapsychologist. All found him to be rock solid sane, which made him feel better and gave him confidence. Monroe seemed to have inadvertently stumbled into an altered state of consciousness that gave him access to a larger reality, producing some amazing evidential data under controlled circumstances with the parapsychologist. Because it had no deleterious effect upon his mental soundness and competency, he was encouraged to pursue, record, and eventually control his unusual experiences. What sort of evidential data do you have? I shot back. Most of it was in a book, he said. Remote viewing sorts of things for the most part. What exactly is remote viewing? I asked. Obtaining information paranormally by going somewhere in the out-of-body state to collect the target information without taking your body along, as it were. And so if y'all been here for a few days and we read through the CIA document, and I also left you a video in the community section and in Facebook about Dr. Stephen Greer, It was actually called remote viewing. If you actually had a chance to look at that, if you didn't know what remote viewing is, it's another word for clearly out-of-body experiences, or some people call it astral projecting, right? But they've also been doing tests with it. So if you haven't watched that, go back and watch it in the community section. You're going to have to scroll down a little bit to the early part of the week of last week when I shared it. Yeah, last week when I shared it. But it's really good. Okay. What sort of evidential data do you have? I shot back. Most of it was in the book, he said. Remote viewing sorts of things for the most part. What exactly is remote viewing? I asked. Obtaining information paranormally by going somewhere in the out-of-body state to collect the target information without taking your body along, as it were. Oh, I see, I said sheepishly, realizing that I had asked a dumb question that should have been obvious. My momentary pause gave others a chance to horn in on my private conversation. No one was shy any longer. Toward the end of the meeting, Monroe took us to the facility that he had hoped to soon turn into a lab dedicated to the study of altered states of consciousness. It was obvious to me that he desperately wanted to legitimize what had spontaneously happened to him. He wanted to remove the stigma of nutty and replace it with the approval of an accepting science. He was earnest, serious, and willing to put his money where his mouth was. He was not posturing or hustling. He was genuinely interested in real science. He wanted legitimacy, not recognition, money, or fame. He was a successful local businessman. Additionally, he was the CEO of a growing cable company and appeared to me to be totally sane, intelligent, under control, and conservative. Best of all, he was a rational type. He had an engineer's personality. He was more straightforward and intellectually precise, less emotionally driven than most of the technical professionals who were now pelting him with questions. The quality of the questioning was erratic. Clearly, he was a polite and patient man. If you did not know he wrote about out-of-body experiences, you would have never guessed it from his circumstances, appearance, or demeanor. Then came an offer I could not refuse. Gazing at a bunch of us loungingly on the back deck of the nascent lab, Monroe challenged us. You folks are technical, scientific types, aren't you? He asked rhetorically. We all nodded our heads and mumbled our concurrence, wondering what was coming next. I'm looking for some hardcore science and engineering types, he continued. Someone with good professional credentials who could help me do real and proper science that would be acceptable to other scientists. So that's why we were invited, I thought, with mounting expectation. Great. My hand shot in the air and my hand shot into the air, a reflexive act conditioned by over 20 consecutive years as a student. I couldn't help it. I could not, it seemed, respond to any question with my arms at my side. Monroe looked directly at me, amused by my waving hand. Feeling a little stupid, I pulled my hand down out of the air and said, I'm a physicist and I'm very interested in your research into altered states. If you will teach me what you know about out-of-body and altered states of consciousness, I will help you do legitimate scientific research. Almost immediately, from the other side of the deck, another voice spoke up. I'm an electrical engineer, and I would like to work with you if you would teach me what you know. I strained to see who was speaking. It was a young guy, maybe a few years older than me, but not much. I did not know him. He wasn't riding in the car I had come in. Monroe looked at us intently. A long and pregnant pause ensued as he assessed the situation and weighed his options. Everyone was quiet, waiting to see what would happen next. I think that Monroe would have preferred older, more established scientists to staff his lab. someone more mature, with an established reputation, instant credibility. But we both knew that those types were not likely to be interested or willing to work for an exchange of knowledge. If they had established professional reputations, they had reputations to protect and would never allow themselves to become associated with something this far out on the fringe, this far away from the safety of the crowd. Scientists, contrary to their own press reports, are most just sheep of a different sort. All credibility flows from peer review, and the more notable peers of the scientific community would treat altered states of consciousness and out of body as intellectual leprosy. Monroe had run headlong into a brick wall of closed-mindedness previously, which is probably why he craved respectability and acceptability. He quickly evaluated his chances to do better. Finally, he broke the long silence. "What kind of degrees do you have?" Dennis Minerick, the other volunteer, had a master's degree in electrical engineering. "Okay," he said confidently. "You got a deal. Call me in a few days and we'll set up a meeting." He rattled off a telephone number. The subject changed. I stopped paying close attention to the conversation. I was excited as someone I was as excited as someone like me can get. That is, I felt a mild surge of anticipation. Where would this lead? What could he actually teach us? How would he attempt to teach us? What scientific protocols would be applicable? What kind of data would we be collecting? What would we be measuring? Question after question poured through my mind. What if it turned out to be bogus? If I found out he wasn't actually interested in real science, I would quickly and politely bow out. That would be easy enough. The evening had turned out better than I expected. I was going to be studying altered states, something that I had wanted to do for a year or more, but did not know how to start. This could be a great opportunity. Hold on. I need a sip of water. Hold on, y'all. Okay. Okay. This could be a great opportunity, I thought. Well, maybe I'll just wait and see what happens, if anything happens at all. I did not know it then, but my life was about to take a sharp turn. Strange and stranger, all carefully scientific, of course, was about to become as common as air. After a few days passed, I called the number scrawled on a scrap of paper that I hastily obtained that night on the deck at Monroe's. It had been dark. We were outside. At the time, the number seemed clear. I dialed it again. There was no answer. I tried it later. No answer. The next day was the same, and the day after that, no answer, no answer, no answer. I let it go the rest of the week. The next week, I tried it again. No answer. I decided that perhaps the 3 was actually an 8 and tried that. No answer. I tried information. Monroe had an unlisted number. I let it rest a few more days. 2 weeks had gone by since our visit. I tried it with the 3 again and then with the 8. Hold on. Somebody began to talk. Geez, it was just an answering machine. The machine mentioned no names. I left a message. Nothing happened. No one returned the call. A few days later, I decided to try one more time. I was so surprised when a woman's voice offered a polite hello that it took me a second to focus on what I was doing. A real flesh and blood person. Wow. I asked to speak to Mr. Monroe. What is this in reference to? She asked politely. I was on a roll. Is this Robert Monroe's residence? I asked. Yes, she said. Who is this? With immense relief and having made the connection, I quickly explained who I was and said that Mr. Monroe had asked me to call him in a few days, and that was about 2.5 weeks ago. Just a minute, she said. Finally, I thought he'll probably be glad to hear from me. I imagined that he was concerned that I had perhaps changed my mind. He had seemed excited, even somewhat anxious about getting his lab up and running. Hello, the voice said on the other side of the line with no sense of familiarity. Maybe she didn't tell him who I was, I reasoned. This is Tom Campbell, I said. We talked on the deck at your lab a few weeks ago. I am the physicist. You asked me to call you. What? He said, physicist? What kind of physicist are you? What sort of question was that? From his tone, it was obvious that he did not know who I was and that he didn't remember our deal, or he was pretending that he didn't. He was obviously not sitting around worrying because I had not called sooner. I detailed the visit and the offer that we had agreed upon. Oh, that physicist, he said with dramatic inflection. What is your name again? I told him my name a second time. There was another guy with you, wasn't there? Yes, there was another guy. His name was Dennis. I replied tersely and waited. Why don't you two come to the lab next Thursday? He said after a short pause. That's good for me, I replied. I'll check with Dennis and let you know. Just come on, he said. No need to let me know. Just come on up to the lab at 7, you and Dennis. Is that okay? Sure, I said a little puzzled. Do you know how to get there? Yes, I answered. I can get there. I'll see you this coming Thursday evening at 7 at the lab. I paused to make sure there was no misunderstanding. He mumbled a gratuitous, okay, sounding mildly annoyed that he had to listen to me repeat the arrangements, and hung up. How does he know that Dennis will be able and willing to come this Thursday, I wondered. I sure didn't know that yet. How could he be that sure? I pondered the circumstance. Does he want me to come by myself? If Dennis cannot make it? He didn't seem particularly eager to get started. Or is his mind a little loose? Now that conversation was definitely strange, I mused. In time, I would eventually get used to Mr. Monroe being distracted and knowing things paranormally. His mind was not loose. He was always a step ahead and usually right. Unlike me, he did not need to wait for the facts. I told Dennis the next morning. Excuse me. No problem, he said. I told him that Monroe had seemed to know that he would be able to come Thursday evening. We looked at each other and shrugged our shoulders. Had you told me this yesterday or any time last week, I would have told you that I couldn't have made it, Dennis added as an afterthought. But just this morning, things changed. Now I have no conflict. This was going to be an interesting adventure. I just knew it. Who's going to drive? Dennis asked. I plan to take my cycle. Do you want to ride with me? Okay, he said. I have my own helmet. I used to have a bike a few years back. I have a big 4-cylinder Honda. 2 people won't be a problem. Great, he replied. That should be fun. He's pretty courageous, I thought. I hardly knew this guy. He knows nothing about me, and he is willing to get on the back of a motorcycle with me. Maybe only once, I chuckled to myself. I got directions to his house and agreed to pick him up at 6:15 p.m. And chapter 7 is The Adventure Begins. We already the hour. I really want to read it. It's Friday. What y'all think? Read one more? It's like 2 pages. Y'all want to read one more? The Adventure Begins? I'll let y'all choose. It's Friday. I know some people out of work, at least around here in my area, because they're preparing for this storm that's supposedly supposed to be coming. Y'all want me to read one more chapter? It's like 2 pages. Well, not even 2 full pages. It's a page and a half. Yay? Yes? Sure. Okay. Chapter 7. The Adventure Begins. The trip to Whistlefield was a combination of interstate and country roads. Most of the mileage was on a brand new, lightly traveled interstate. I loved my motorcycle. I love speed. I love acceleration. I love the feel of finely controlled and responsive raw power, and I love the presence, the sense of being alive, and the focus in the present moment that you get on a big motorcycle. You, the bike, the environment, and fate. One tightly integrated package, a shared destiny. That was fun. With Dennis on the back, I resolved to be conservative. Nothing over 85 miles per hour on a regular basis was my plan. I would not be responsible, polite, or friendly to be reckless with somebody else's. It would not be responsible, polite, or friendly to be reckless with somebody else's life. At 120 miles per hour, my bike was rock solid and smooth as silk. It was made for speed, and I was addicted to it. I had driven cycles ever since I was a teenager. With this particular bike, it was love at first sight. The biggest, the best, the fastest. Dennis was fearless. He never once complained or flinched, except once when a drive chain broke while we were humming along at 85 miles per hour. At 80 miles per hour, and he almost lost a few fingers. A near miss. But when you are young enough to be immortal and invincible, any miss is as good as a mile. We never skipped a beat. Dennis was always ready and relaxed. Mounted on his trusty steel steed, we cut the travel time to Whistlefield to less than half an hour. Once we got through the initial get-to-know-you data exchanges, schedules were quickly worked out and routines established. Dennis and I would go to the lab 2 or 3 times a week, and sometime on weekends. We would spend the first hour or so setting up equipment, soldering wires, designing and making measurement devices, in general, wiring and outfitting the place to be a lab. After a while, Monroe would join us at the lab, and the real fun began. Under Bob Monroe's guidance, Dennis and I would begin a systematic exploration of altered states of consciousness. We were constantly working towards consistent, repeatable, evidential experience. After a few hours of exploration, Bob would invite us back to the house for discussions, chit-chat, planning, or perhaps to meet some other investigators who were working in related areas. His lovely wife, Nancy, the ever proper, polite, and most congenial hostess, would often join our discussion. Dennis and I were so bright-eyed and bushy-tailed in our dogged pursuit of the outer edge of reality that our constant state of total amazement night after night amused her to no end. It seemed as if Bob knew everyone in the country who was investigating or experiencing anything unusual. They all came to Whistlefield eventually to meet Bob and share the results of their individual efforts. Bob was like a magnet in this disconnected community of leading-edge researchers, experimenters, and freelance kooks because of his no-nonsense, straightforward manner and wonderfully open mind. There was no snake oil being hawked at Whistlefield. Because of Bob's reputation and the operation Because of Bob's reputation and the operation and reputation of the lab, there was a steady stream of tremendously interesting visitors. I was impressed that there were so many intelligent and sober individuals, sometimes with impressive credentials, who took this area of endeavor seriously. These were not whacked out druggies doing their counterculture thing. Bob had zero tolerance for that sort. He did not want to tarnish his legitimacy by being associated with drug users. The Timothy Leary types were out. Other than that, Bob was open to almost everything anybody took seriously. However, he was also always skeptical, open-minded and skeptical. He wanted to see hard evidence. Claims were interesting, but never enough. Most of the visitors were middle-aged, serious professionals looking for serious answers to serious questions. They, for the most part, were looking for validation and hard evidence. There were the occasional groupies trying to increase their credibility by associating with Bob and his research effort, and a few whose main objective was to impress him with their unusual talents. Bob had little patience for either. He politely but firmly sent the pretenders and non-contributors on their way. And this is where we will pause today, my beautiful people. Tomorrow, we'll pick it back up with the science of altered states on page 75. We already on page 75, y'all. It's almost like 300 pages in this book. It's getting good, y'all. It's getting good. So we read 3 chapters, chapter 5, 6, and 7. And that was starting on page 59. 72. Oh, yeah, I put this in here. 75. Sorry, 74. All right, beautiful people. I hope y'all are enjoying it. I guess y'all might be because y'all said keep reading. All right, y'all. So that's it for today. Excuse me. Tomorrow we'll read a little bit more. Yeah, I'm going to be sharing some things. There were some things I was going to share yesterday, but I didn't get a chance to share it. I got it written out, and I think I need to break it up. One of the things I'm about to post, I think it's probably a little bit too long, and it mixes, just going over it. It mixes, well, it doesn't really mix. It kind of flows, but I think I want to kind of keep them separate. They're not separate. You'll see. What I post in the community section is going to just like all flow together. I'm just kind of breaking it up into little segments. I don't want it to be too overwhelming because I'm trying to think about it from people who are just learning. Like they've heard, but they're still trying to put it together. So I don't want to put too much information in a post where it becomes like too much and you just don't even take in 1/3 of it. So I'm trying to cut it down and just share that 1/3 of information that you would probably get. So I'm breaking it up into multiple posts. So bear with me, y'all. I want to make sure it's coherent when I put it out and you can understand it, right? So I'm trying to ask myself all the questions I would ask and that I have asked before I put it up there, just to make sure I explained it clear enough. So bear with me. I'm going to be posting it today and over the next few days because I'm trying to hit the parts from Genesis that we've already clearly blown past already, but I haven't quite explained it like I wanted to just yet. So just bear with me, y'all. Just keep checking back. Keep checking back. All right. So with that being said, y'all, it is Friday, January the 21st, 2022, day number 10 of year 4 of reading through the books of the law and the prophets. And of the 4-year consecutive day count, it is day 1028. We read Genesis chapter 28 through 30, and we read My Big Toe chapters 5 through 7, which is also pages 59 through 74. And I remember to share the website page in Legends of the Jews, where the story with Rachel and Leah begins. Let's read through all that. Y'all really enjoy that. All right, so with that being said, beautiful people, MP, shalom, Lisa, shalom, shalom. All right, y'all. Hold on. Hey, did Bella come down here? I think. No, it was just the boys that came down here looking for her. I think she might still be asleep. If I ain't seen her by now, she definitely still asleep. So I'm going to go ahead and do the blessing today. And it is found in Numbers chapter 6, verses 22 through 27. And Yahuwah spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto Aaron and unto his sons, saying, On this wise ye shall bless the children of Israel, saying unto them, Yahuwah will kneel before us presenting gifts, and will guard us with a hedge of protection. Yahuwah will illuminate the wholeness of his being towards us, bringing order, and he will provide us with love, sustenance, and friendship. Yahuwah will lift up the wholeness of his being and look upon us, and he will set in place all we need to be whole and complete. And they shall put my name upon the children of Israel, and I will bless them. Also, as a quick recap, just in case y'all don't remember, while we're reading a book such as this, and while we read through the CIA document, it's to help us in our spiritual understanding and our spiritual growth, letting us know that some of these spiritual things that happen to people is not just set aside for church people or people who are kooky or whatever, but this is a real thing that has been built on the inside of all of us that we can tap into. It was designed for us to. We were designed to walk supernaturally here in this realm, right? But just through the process of time, information has been hidden, lost, and we lost understanding. Now we're just trying to rediscover all this ancient information that was available for all, and not just for certain groups and types of people, right? This is how we tap into our God bodies, so to speak, if you want to say that, right? So hopefully y'all getting over being perturbed with different types of terms. That's why I try to use all of the ones like out of body, astral projecting, because saying astral projecting in the church would just throw them into a tizzy. Oh, you don't like that term? Okay, what you call it? Open visions. Okay, so I had this open vision, right? And it's like, okay, we can listen to you now. So we're trying to get over that, being perturbed by different terms, but we're showing you that it's the same exact thing. And if you understand it, you can operate in it on purpose, and you can grow spiritually on purpose, and kind of just not sit back and wait for things happen to you, right? We should be proactive. We should know what's coming, right? That's how we were taught in the beginning. We knew how to operate and grow. There was an actual training course. Like when our children came into this world, we prepared them with all of this knowledge to begin to grow and understand the world around them, so they can understand who they are, right, and who our creator is, and just, blossom from there. So that's why we're looking at, we're reading the different books on meditation from different areas of expertise, showing you that we're all talking about the same thing here. And it doesn't have to be spooky, and you don't have to be aloof from information. You can really know what's going on and know it beyond a shadow of a doubt. And when you have a question or you need to pray and ask y'all something, you can go into prayer or whatever you want to call it, or into meditation, and know that you're going to come out with the answer you need. You ain't got to be, I'm just waiting, sweet by and by, my answer going to come. No, that's foolishness. It's absolute rubbish. It really is. So with that being said, that's why we're reading these extra books. It's going to help us in our growth, right? So that's it. That's all. I see y'all tomorrow, 7:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Remember, the weekends, we come in a little bit later, 15 minutes later. So during the week, 7:15. The weekend, 7:30. If we're not observing the Sabbath, right? And then we'll just rest. All right. So with that being said, I think I'll leave y'all a couple links for some good translators of the Sumerian text today. Because when I tell you, I got to the portion yesterday where they're talking about the Sabbath and the actual creation of Adam. I've been having this conversation with my sister. I'm like, yo, I don't think it was just one person that was created. I'm getting to this portion, and what I surmised from all my studying, I'm actually coming through the Sumerian text. I called my sister while she was at work. I know you at work and you on the flow. I need your ear for like 30 seconds. Remember what I was telling you about, and how I was saying that I think it was just more than just one? I said I'm going through these Sumerian texts, and there were groups of 7 of them made, right? 7 males, 7 females. So, which helps us understand who some of these people were. When Cain and Abel got kicked out, well, not when Cain and Abel got kicked out. When Cain got that mark after he killed Abel, and he took his wife and he went to the land of Nod, so to speak. And all of these names are not even the real names that we're reading about. But so you're familiar with what I'm talking about, the situation, we know that there were people there, right? And where these people come from, right? And a different, I'm going to just give y'all a link. If you're interested in the Sumerian text, I give you the link and a good author of it. I'll leave that today so you can go check into it. Just check into it if you're interested. And expand your understanding a little bit more, right? Okay. So that's it. That's all. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. Bruce.